Now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy, go ahead.
I am so grateful tonight for all that God has done to prepare me to be receptive to the Christian Science taught by this church. There was quite a long time that I was not ready, but God never gave up on me. I spent years being incredibly angry and hateful, to the point where it was painful to hear happy people laugh sometimes. When I think about why this happened, I see that living a godless life for a long enough time will do that to anyone, because without God there's no purpose or joy or love. After my daughter was born, I knew I didn't want to raise her to be angry and hateful. I also knew it was up to me to break that chain, so she didn't have to. At first, I was totally clueless on how to move forward. Right now, it seems the most natural thing to be happy and loving. But back then, I actually worried whether I could let all that anger go, and if I did, would there be anything left of me? I did love my daughter, however, so I took that as a starting point. I got the idea to look at other people and think, someone somewhere loves you, so I'm going to try to adopt that feeling. This process took years to make a difference, but I'm so glad for the struggle because I can see how crucial it is not to lose our joy and gratitude and love. After working at this for 16 years, God brought me to Plainfield, and I am grateful that I can smile every day and am learning even more about how to love. A little after I arrived, the following verses from Romans chapter 8 were in a lesson and have stayed with me. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. I understand now that God was getting me, all those years ago, to start looking at other people as his children, and what's more, to see that we're all in this together. I'm so grateful for every lesson he has given me to make me ready to be here, for his constant care throughout my whole life, and for all the lessons and practitioner support that I've received since arriving in Plainfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Pilar from New York, go ahead.
Good evening. I want to give a testimony of something that happened at work this week. My company has been going through some struggles, losing money, and in particular the department I work for. What happened was this past Tuesday, a meeting was called by all the senior management, and in the meeting they let us know that there were going to be some cuts, serious cuts in the department. I had, prior to going into the meeting, asked the Plainfield practitioner to pray for me and support me, as I was feeling really nervous and had no idea what was going to happen. All the time in the meeting, I kept reminding myself that there's only one mind, and as the practitioner pointed out, there can be not all these little minds, but just one mind, God. He was directing the meeting. Sure enough, I went in there, and amongst all these turbulence, I did affirm that, and I say these people are directed only by God. And actually, it turned out to be pretty harmonious, if that could be possible, that even though the cuts were going to be made, the people that were going to lose their jobs were offered other positions within the company. So they had the option to apply to those positions if they wish so. Otherwise, there were going to be a fairly generous severance package. I was very happy how this turned out because I was losing two of my team members, and I was able to encourage them and ask them to consider applying to the other positions. I'm very grateful for the support of the practitioner and for Mary Baker Eddy and her writings, for the readings tonight that were really wonderful, and for Plainfield Church. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. Last Wednesday's testimony meeting was especially uplifting for me, and the uplift and comfort continued afterward with lovely music my husband turned on. Then wisdom from a line in a song not familiar to me came through as if aimed directly at me. It was a correction I wasn't aware of needing, and but for the inspiring service and beautiful music, I doubt that I would have been open to it or glimpsed the deeper meaning. Thanks to God, on whom I must rely to make it practical for the guidance. Even minor changes can get us going in a better or truer direction. And thank you, Plainfield members and other participants, for that healing service. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. This evening, I would like to thank a practitioner from our Plainfield Church for working with me on seeing man correctly, not personally. All of us in one activity with God, because God is everywhere. Excuse me. Yesterday, in the early afternoon, while driving with my grandchild in a car, from the left lane, another car in the left lane swerved into my lane right in front of me, then turned left, crossing two oncoming lanes into the railroad station. And I kept going. Everything happened very quickly. I did not realize the magnitude of this event until many hours later. Humanly, this is observed as protection, but this spiritual reality was God's law in action, demonstrating no time or space, which resulted in seeing the protection. In Him we live and move and have our being. Thank you, Plainfield Church, and thank you for the magnificent readings and this beautiful service and music.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. I am so grateful for the Plainfield Church classes and for the watch program from our church. The 3 watches each week alert us to what is needed in the form of current mental work. The watch last night was especially helpful to me, for it not only applied to our church, but it also could be adapted very easily to the essential needed work for our nation as we soon go into the polls to select a president and other officers. I am most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Hello. I'm very grateful tonight for all of the prayerful help received from a practitioner from the Plainfield Church regarding the 2 recent fires in Southern California, not that far away from my home. When I called a practitioner from this church regarding the first fire, there was lots of smoke being blown in our direction. She spoke to me about the 3 Hebrew men in the fiery furnace. Not even the smell of smoke was on their clothes. She gave me a quote from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and I know that many of you know this one. There is no vapid fury of mortal mind expressed in earthquake, wind, wave, lightning, fire, bestial ferocity, and this so-called mind is self-destroyed. And it does go on. There's like a whole paragraph. She said to see only the face of God in the smoke, like Mrs. Eddy saw the face of God in a great big storm clouds rolling in her direction one day, and it was changed to a gentle rain. Lastly, she said that love, God, extinguishes error. Well, armed with these thoughts, the first fire was 72% contained in the next 3 days when I called her back. The second fire was a different situation. It presented a much more frightening picture with structures being burned and traveling much faster than the first. Because of the smoke, many exaggerated and frightening claims were being made. This time when I called the practitioner, she said again that love, truth, God extinguishes error in whatever form it, mortal mind, takes. She added with emphasis that these things, fires and floods, are not always what they seem, and we needed to pray for the nation, and reminded me of the storm Sandy. She also said to read the text of Wednesday's readings on true government. Well, I found that when I began to pray for the nation, our government, the election, that God governs this nation, I began to calm way down. So when I did watch the news on the second day of the fire, one could see the hand of God helping the firefighters, protecting homes by causing the wind to change direction and cause the fire to burn up a hill away from the homes. When I called back again 2 days later, the fire was 22% contained and doubled the next day in containment. I'm so very grateful for practitioner help, for Mrs. Eddy's Christian Science as practiced in the Plainfield Church, and for God's love and protection.
Thank you. Where is Maria from? Wisconsin. Maria from Wisconsin, go ahead.
Oh, I did not realize that I was going to give a testimony, so this, I guess, must be a blessing. I just want to say that I have major great gratitude for Christian Science and the Plainfield Church. And the readings were wonderful, and I'm just very grateful. And I just want to say also that I want to continue praying for my family and the world. And again, I'm just so grateful for Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the service and the beautiful readings. Tonight I would like to express my gratitude for the powerful healing material which is easily available 24/7 on our website. Recently, one of my sons came to me for comfort upon hearing the shocking news of the loss of one of his close college friends to suicide. At first, it was difficult to process. It was the middle of the night, so I went to the Plainfield website to quiet my thought, where I always find comfort and peace. One particular testimony that I found on the site, called "Thou Turnest My Mourning into Praise," was very helpful to me. The author wrote of her experience with the loss of her husband. I'm going to read part of it. Quote, "Peace, joy, and happiness are part of our very being and are not dependent upon any person." She also wrote, quote, "Do I believe what I have learned in Christian Science or not? Do I really believe that life is eternal and can never end? Do I trust God's disposal of events? Do I really believe that I am a complete idea of God and that my husband and I are both God's children and that it's God who has provided for our every need? Then it's time to prove it." Unquote. I called my practitioner the next morning, and I know without her prayers, I would not have been able to keep from being overcome with distress over the picture of the situation. She helped direct my thought and prayers for the family, in support of my son, the world, and to keep my thought in the love of God. Her strength and tenderness held us as different things came up, and each step God's care and hand were evident. During this time, I knew I would not be any use to God or anyone for that matter by allowing my thoughts to be drawn downward into fear and sympathy. It required great discipline to affirm all that I was learning about God. I am also grateful for our weekly watches, which are needed prayers for our world, affirming that God is ever present, all-powerful, all good for all His creation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dede or Florence, go ahead.
Thank you. My daughter recently started attending preschool, and this made me realize how frightening and unnerving the experience can be for little children and their parents. The thought came to me one morning that any progressive step or experience comes from God, is God-directed and God-protected, so there is no need to fear when moving forward with His guidance. So grateful for what I'm learning in this church about Christian Science. My thought is constantly changing, and I'm blessed by truth with new right thoughts to work with under every circumstance. I know now that I don't have to tolerate the suggestion of fear in progress for myself or for anyone. And I'm so thankful to God for this great comfort. Thank you so much for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Carol.
Last week we had a tremendous heat wave, and heat and I do not get along well. So I had been out grocery shopping and came back carrying the groceries into the house and up the stairs, and I just felt so horribly hot. I felt weak. I felt like I wasn't going to make it up to the top of the stairs, and I said, boy, I'm really losing it. And then the thought came just as quickly, you can't lose what was never yours. And I started to laugh. I realized it's not my strength or my stamina, it's God's. God supplies everything we need every moment, and we're never without His care, without His support. And I continued up the stairs laughing the whole way up and realizing how silly it was. And I'm just so very grateful that we can turn to God in any daily situation. There's nothing that's too ridiculous for God to step in and help us with. I just am so very grateful to have such a wonderful God, and for Mrs. Eddy for giving us this wonderful way of life, and for practitioner help. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. 5 years ago, we bought a mini truck for my wife's business. She needed a cap on the back to carry her goods in, and in pricing the item found it had to be custom made and thus was outrageously expensive. Always having been pretty creative in such things, but since coming into the study of Christian Science and with the creative power of God, I was able to build one for a fraction of the price. My wife loves the vehicle, and after she had gotten hit by another car last year, decided we needed to find a backup. We found a very nice second vehicle, and my wife wanted another cat built. Having advanced greatly over the past year participating here at Plainfield, the whole process went very smoothly and, much to my amazement, even less expensive because I was able to cut some costs through God's inspiration. Most of the project was finished in no time, and yesterday I needed to complete the back door. At the first cap, I had a piece of heavy plastic scrap that I was able to cut a piece from, which worked perfectly. I wasted a lot of time trying to find another piece similar to that in all my stored miscellaneous treasures, well, really junk, and seemed to have hit a roadblock because I couldn't even find one, or I couldn't buy one either. Finally, I realized that I wasn't feeling very good yesterday, and it was not a very good day, and I was really dragged down. I realized I'd been thinking about not feeling well a lot, but not really doing anything appropriate about it. I knew what was appropriate from many testimonies I've heard here on Wednesday night, and also from the wonderful lessons and roundtables, I had to stop indulging error and put an end to it. I took the time to sit down and worked at being at one with God until I felt peace. Then I turned back to the work at hand, and I found a piece of leftover aluminum that resolved the problem sitting right next to the vehicle, where it had been all along. I have heard so many times stated here at Plainfield, when one does things from the standpoint of God, it always works out better than we could have outlined ourselves. That's exactly what happened. I'm so grateful for this lesson from the testimonies given. I'm also grateful that when I first testified here, a practitioner had the moral courage to give me correction. At the time, I have to admit, I didn't quite appreciate it as much as I do now. One can feel the Spirit of the Christ shining through the testimonies and how that Spirit teaches and heals us. I'm so grateful to have been led to the Plainfield Church Independent by God. I'm so grateful to Christ Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy for their wonderful teachings, the lessons I'm learning here at Plainfield, and the wonderful readings tonight, the testimonies that are always so uplifting to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, go ahead.
Thank you. We heard tonight one of Jesus' Beatitudes, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." One of the things I am very grateful for being taught in this church is what meekness really is. Before I got here, I thought meekness was like self-deprecation and a source of sign of weakness, and I never felt really quite right until a practitioner in this church taught me that meekness is yielding your personal sense of things to God, and it is the greatest source of strength, not weakness. It's the greatest source of wisdom and intelligence, and it's something to be cultivated and desired. Well, with the help of that practitioner, I had a lot of pride burned out of me. Sometimes it was painful, often it was painful, but it nevertheless helped me to appreciate and become more meek, more humble, for which I am extremely grateful. And I had an experience a few years ago that kind of brought this home for me. I'm in the investment business, and one of my great challenges every day is to rely on God's wisdom to know how to invest. And one day I bought a bond that on the surface looked extremely attractive, looked like a great investment. And but there was one thing about it that kind of concerned me. There was no way to know whether my concern was legitimate or not. But it kind of concerned me. And everybody that I talked to about it assured me that there was no reason to be concerned. It was not a problem, and besides, you'll never know for a long time whether it's a problem or not. So don't be concerned. Well, that night I couldn't sleep. And in the morning, it was clear to me that the reason I couldn't sleep was God was telling me something. And even though humanly there was no way to know whether my concern was legitimate or not, I realized that my concern was legitimate because it was coming from God. So I made arrangements to sell the bond that I had bought the day before. And in doing so, I had to admit to a lot of people I had made a mistake. I had to tell our most important client that I had made a mistake. And ended up selling the bond at a slight loss. which for a lot of people would have been humiliating. But I was able to sleep that night and felt confident that I had done the right thing and moved on. And about 6 months later, it became known that the concern that I had was, in fact, a very legitimate concern. And whoever owned the bond at the time lost a tremendous amount of money. Well, as I look back on this, I'm confident. There were times in my life where I would not have had the humility to admit that I made a mistake to sell the bond when I sold it. It was the right thing to do in every way. I'm so grateful to be learning about God, how God speaks to us, the importance of obeying God, and why humility is absolutely so essential in being able to do so. So grateful for everything I am learning about Christian Science, for Mary Baker Eddy for giving us this tremendous way of life, and for all the help I've received in this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom from New York, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to express my gratitude for, excuse me, the wonderful things that I've learned from this church and the support that I get from everybody there. It's just an absolutely wonderful church. So where I work, basically in the last year or so, the whole place went south. And so it was kind of distressing and, all sort of unpleasant stuff, And it changed management, and but a lot of stuff was still kind of not so great. But one of the things I would stick to is that, like, when I go to work, and it's true wherever I am, where I'm at home or at church or wherever, but my purpose in life is to bless others and know that God governs all. God is our creator. And so, I would think those things when I'm at work, that, if something I didn't think right was happening or unpleasant, that, well, there's only one mind. And that mind is God's mind, and you stick to it. And, the watch this week was kind of interesting in kind of what I was going through about, life, I don't know how to say it, but anyway, we can go through difficult times, and that being a Christian Scientist doesn't mean that everything should be, happy, not sure if I'm saying that right, but anyway, so we learn through what we're going through. And so, as the year has progressed, it just seems like one by one, a lot of the things that I was looking for was happening. I hire new people, I get consultants to help. I made a trip down to Charlotte, spent an entire week there. I get a new person in the UK to help me out, and I can just go on and on like this. But it all didn't happen in a day, and it really required patience. And if it weren't for this church, your website, your lesson, and your services and everything, and your watches, I probably would have taken a different tack. But it kind of grounds me. And so I appreciate that. And so many wonderful things have happened. I just really wanted to express my gratitude and, to everybody who's a member of this church. So thank you.
Thank you. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you for this beautiful service tonight. In the first hymn that we sung, one of the verses, part of the verse said, "Thy presence fills my solitude. Thy providence turns all to good." Sometimes I'll hear about loneliness. Loneliness is something very difficult. It can be painful. Someone feels that they are all alone in life, and I have great compassion for that. Recently, in speaking to a member of our church who does live alone and who's lived alone for a long time, excepting her 2 cats, anyway, we were talking about this loneliness because this person never feels lonely. And she said, you know, it's really denying God's presence and power to feel lonely. And that is such a true statement when you think of it. When you are thinking that, you are denying the fact that God's very presence and power are with you. One time in my life when I was feeling particularly alone, very sad and sorry for myself, I realized that I was feeling alone mainly because I wasn't feeling God's presence and power, and that how important this is to each of us, whether we are surrounded with friends and family or not. It is very important to know that God's presence and power are with us, that we are at one with Him, that He is in fact our very consciousness. So I began to work on this, and one of the things, and I've told some of you this, that I began to do is I would take note during the day of all the good things that happened, be it small or great, and there were many wonderful good things, from, you know, just a smile on someone's face or a beautiful cloud passing by. I mean, when you think of all the goodness that does take place in a period of a day, there is much to be grateful for. So I would make note of that, and then when I could, I would get into my room, and it was a symbolic gesture, but I would get on my knees and thank God that He was with me that day, and thank God that I felt His presence, and to thank God for all the good that had gone on in my life. And in doing that, I began to become much more aware that He was with me. I wasn't alone. I was never alone. He was always there. And sometimes if I needed, something like someone to come and help me in some way, or even some kind of counsel, He would send me that too, and I would see it as angel messages. I wouldn't see it as a person or however it seemed to come, but I would see it as God in my life blessing me. And this changed me immeasurably. And I can say I've never felt that loneliness again. And I do feel God's presence and power, and I do understand to say that you're alone is denying that presence and power. In fact, it would shut it out. So rather than say you're lonely, say, no, God is with me. He is my one relation. He's my best and ever friend. And He has the answer to any problem. He's my comforter. He's all. He's my all in all. I know there's a statement where Mrs. Eddy was asked once if she was lonely, or if she ever felt lonely, and she said, alone, yes, lonely, never. And that's because she knew this. She knew God's presence and power. So His presence does fill our solitude, and we can feel His comfort and His love moment by moment, day by day. I'm so grateful to be learning all of this in Christian Science. I'm so grateful for dear Mrs. Eddy, and thank you all, the beautiful readings and music and testimonies. It's wonderful to be here.